I am very, very excited to welcome Chris Ellis. He's the co-founder and CEO of Thatch. I know many people, I'm going to go off script here for a second, heard wonderful comments about how great the vendors have been next door, and Chris and his team have been a part of that. So just, again, a shout out to all the vendors out there and to Thatch in particular. Thank you so much. Chris is transforming the way businesses deliver health benefits, combining deep expertise in biotech, innovation, and technology to make healthcare more accessible, efficient, and impactful for employers and employees alike. Again, don't know who wrote that, but that was very well written. We are building trust with our workforce and communicating how we are adapting to the modern workforce. It has never been more important than now. It ties directly back to our CHRO playbook. Everyone, please put your hands together and welcome Chris to the stage. Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I like the welcome music in there. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. I know with the government shutdown and the lines at the airports that a couple people are thinking about leaving early, and that's how I know I've got the high-risk cohort, like the fun HR people in here, so this is going to be a fun one today. Really looking forward to it. As I was so kindly introduced, I'm the co-founder and CEO at Thatch. My name is Chris Ellis, and today I'm going to talk to you about ICRAs and kind of the future of healthcare in the United States. And our mission at Thatch is to build a healthcare system that people love. I think this mission is particularly poignant in light of the fact that the reason the government shut down and the reason that people are waiting in line and the reason that the flights are delayed is because of healthcare. The question over how we fund healthcare, the question of what is the future of healthcare in America, what's the potential future for what this model could look like. And right now we know we are in a system that it's in many ways unaffordable, it's not very flexible. Costs are going up faster than they have in 15 years. Many of you in this room are probably affected by that. And before I talk to you about healthcare, I actually want to go back in time and look at a trend that happened many decades ago in a similar space in retirement. So who here remembers pensions? Yes. Who's actually has a pension at their current company today? Okay, so we still got some holdouts. So as many of you know, pensions used to be the predominant way to save for retirement for your employees. And a few decades ago, as the workforce grew more dynamic, people left jobs more frequently, they didn't stay at the same company their entire career. And we went through a period of really elevated costs for pension plans where many of them went underwater. The country rather rapidly flipped to this new model called 401ks, where before the employer would define a benefit, the pension, the retirement strategy, and with the 401k, employees were free to choose the retirement strategy that made the most sense for them. It was a defined contribution. After all, a 22-year-old is going to have a very different retirement strategy than a 55-year-old. Now, we haven't seen the same shift from defined benefit to defined contribution happen in healthcare, but we're starting to see signs that it might. And just as the retirement strategy of a 22-year-old and a 55-year-old are different, the needs and priorities for an individual's healthcare at 22 and 55 and everywhere in between are very different as well. And that's led to this idea on the next. It's led to this idea here about what is the future of employee health benefits, what could that actually look like? And when we think about what makes Thatch possible today, rather than having the company choose a single benefit for their employees, instead they're actually able to define a contribution, and employees can use that contribution to choose whatever insurance plan works well for them. So in many ways, it's a shift from defined benefit to defined contribution, and it has a lot of far-reaching consequences for you as a business and your employees. Has anyone this cycle had to go through some difficult health insurance renewals, Hard conversations with your broker. Yes, I said. People were like raising hands before I even finished the question. That was good. It's been a really tough season. Like this is like really, really hard. And part of what makes it so hard is you, as a business, are on the hook for your own healthcare costs. So if you have one employee that has an issue this year, the insurance companies are going to penalize you as the business for that one employee. And so every year, you're in this kind of rat race of negotiating with the carrier and through the broker to try to figure out how you can tweak this there, get the cost down. And that's actually worked okay for the last decade when healthcare costs were low, when the overall inflation in the environment and the American economy was relatively low. But we're now entering into a phase where you have high specialty drug costs from GLP-1s. We have tariffs working their way through the supply chains, increasing the underlying cost of medical services. We have regulatory pressures where dollars are being pulled out of government markets and insurance companies have to make up their money in the commercial markets, like that's you. And so as a result, the next few years are going to be a period of really sustained increases where this is a taste of what's to come over the next 3 years. With this new model of defined contribution, you're no longer on the hook for your own healthcare costs. You're not actually negotiating with any single insurance company. Instead, companies that participate in defined contribution, think about kind of like the 401k analogy, you actually have everybody in these gigantic plans that end up spreading a lot of the risk over a large number of people. And that's how it works in this model. So if one specific insurance company has a large cost increase, then your employee can simply move to a different insurance company that doesn't have a big of a cost increase. And you, as the employer, don't have to eat a 30 or a 50% renewal. Instead, you're looking at the average increase of all plans across the market, which tends to be a lot lower than what any individual might get exposed to. Sounds like science fiction. How is it possible? Why don't we do it already? Well, it turns out that for a long time, this wasn't legal. And it was only somewhat recently, just a few years ago, that a new law that passed called the Individual Coverage Health Reimbursement Arrangement, or ICHRA for short, which, by the way, I know, it's a terrible acronym. It has the word ick in it. But it's a really powerful concept. Rather than you having to, like I said, choose your own insurance plan and own it, instead, this model allows individuals to purchase individual plans that they can choose and own and keep with them from job to job. And our team actually is built with a really wonderful barbell of people from financial technology companies who have seen the inside of complex financial institutions like Stripe, Shopify, Ramp, Robinhood. And on the other side of the barbell, people with deep healthcare expertise from companies like insurance companies, Oscar and United, to brokerages like Marsh McLennan and so on. And what we've realized is in order to power this experience, where you go from one company to one insurance company to now one company to potentially hundreds of different insurance companies across the country, you need very strong financial infrastructure to make this experience possible. Now, the benefit is not actually just around having the choice of an insurance plan. The employee can actually choose how they allocate the budget that you give them across a range of different options. So for example, this lovely young employee who has a $750 budget might only spend $500 a month on health insurance. They might choose the Anthem HMO plan or the Ambetter, $0 deductible. That $250 a month that they have left over is actually discretionary funds that they can spend on healthcare purchases. So for example, someone might have a therapist that they're seeing, expensive prescriptions that they need to pick up, or they can spend it on a collection of products and services that we curate in our marketplace that I'll tell you a little bit about in a second here. Now you might be wondering, some of you are kind of like in the kind of details, like, okay, how much money do you actually give people and how do you decide what's the right budget for your employees? Because after all, for someone with a family or someone as an individual, like you're gonna have different healthcare costs. So what we do at Thatch is two ways of providing allowances for employees. One is a flat allowance where everyone gets the same dollar value. And that's common for very small businesses or companies that are kind of just getting started or have all of their employees in the same place around the same age. And then the other way, which most companies, particularly large companies, look at, is a dynamic approach, where we provide an allowance that's proportional to the cost of healthcare in everybody's region. And if you look across the country, the cost of healthcare actually varies based on how old you are, where your zip code is, the number of dependents that you have. And so the approach that we've taken is one where everybody across the country can have the similar purchasing power. So for example, if you're on a particular group plan today, what we'll do for every employee is we'll map that group plan onto the individual market. And we'll set an allowance for each employee so that to access that individual plan that it's most similar to the plan you have today, they have the same amount of purchasing power, so it costs the same out of pocket to be able to buy that plan. Now, of course, the benefit is they don't have to buy that plan. They can actually buy whatever plan that they want. And in fact, the benefit of being able to have that choice ends up meaning that employees can not just kind of choose their favorite carrier, but they can opt into an actual healthcare experience that's better for them and their families. And I'll give you an example. So I'm actually happy to be back in Houston. This is where I grew up. And the really interesting thing about Houston, it's a very, very diverse city. And actually, a quarter of households, maybe it's now more, in Houston speak Spanish as a first language. And 10% of the physicians in Houston identify as Hispanic. And so with such a large portion of people that speak Spanish, you would assume that networks of Spanish-speaking doctors would be popular, but yet they don't exist. And the reason for that is because when companies sell to employers, they're selling to the average employer. And if only a quarter of people need something, they're not necessarily designing their products for that quarter of people. They're designing it for the average person. They might speak a different language. And so what we see in the individual market is companies are actually building products for people that speak Spanish as a first language, as an example, which has been hugely popular here in Texas and Florida. We also see insurance companies crafting plans for specific disease areas. So a great example, with certain carriers will craft plans for diabetes to lower the cost of diabetes medication. And ultimately, the benefits of choice actually play themselves out, not just in choose my favorite carrier, but also in the actual design of the plans. And some of the folks in this room are designing really amazing plans like Ambetter from Centene. They're launching them in brand new markets. And there's a level of competition that we haven't seen in decades. Blue Cross, United, Cigna, and Aetna, every single one of those companies is older than the internet. So it's been a very long time since we've had new entrants, new models to consider. And that's part of what I believe is actually holding us back from having a healthcare system that's more in tune with the consumer. And it's not just the benefits of plan options that the consumer has. It's really important to be able to help guide individuals to the plans that work best for them and their families. And that's part of the whole process of choosing a plan that we enable at Thatch. And I'll give you an example. I just celebrated my one-year-old's birthday last week, so very excited. My first, thank you, I'll take the applause. Yeah, thank you. He's a beautiful baby. I wish I put him into the presentation because he's this really big, chunky, beautiful, amazing baby. And when we got pregnant, and I'm using the royal we here because my wife did most of the work, but when we were pregnant, my wife had a very specific OBGYN in Austin where I live that she wanted to see. And she spent hours researching and doing all the homework and reading their reviews and actually finding this one person that was absolutely perfect for her. And she came home one day totally crestfallen and she said, "You're not gonna believe it, my company, her employer, does not cover this OBGYN in the plan that they offer." And I pulled her aside and I was like, "Babe, there's this amazing company I have to tell you about called Thatch. You can actually type in the doctor that you want to see and go and choose a plan that covers that doctor And sure enough, we did, and the baby was born happy and healthy, and it was amazing. And she was like, you should put that as the case study on the front page of the website. I'm like, people might think I'm a little biased because it's my wife, but I like to share that story because the way people interact with the healthcare system is very personal. One person might really care about a particular therapist that may or may not take insurance. Another person might have a doctor they've been seeing their whole lives. And it's very difficult to take care of every single individual when you have an approach that is so geared towards the average person. Because the truth is that the shoe that fits everybody actually fits nobody. And there's no better place where I get really excited about the opportunity to personalize the healthcare experience than in our marketplace. So when you have money left over that you don't want to spend on insurance, a big question we get is, what do I spend it on? And for companies that are self-insured, they might have 20-point solutions that they're working with from mental health and MSK and so forth that they want to be able to actually preserve when they move over to a Thatch model. So one of the really awesome things that we did was we actually partnered directly with digital health products and services, everything from at-home testing to new functional medicine tests like Function Health, Oura Rings, all the way up to a really amazing suite of solutions like Lyra Health for mental health, Sword Health for musculoskeletal. And all of the employees get access not to one of them, not to 10 of them, but to all of them. And you don't have to contract with any of these vendors individually. It all comes part of the platform. One of the really big topics today is GLP-1s. Who here covers GLP-1s in their health plan? Quite a few. It's getting easier to do so, but I've heard so many times from certain HR executives that it's a very, very challenging thing to cover because we end up having more utilization than we anticipated, and it's driving up cost of the health plan significantly. And in fact, the adoption of GLP-1s and specialty drugs is actually a big driver of the inflation in healthcare costs overall. And so we partner directly with companies like Lilly and so forth to be able to get direct access to drugs like GLP-1s so that for employees that want a GLP-1, they can opt into a less expensive health plan that more is aligned to their healthcare goals, and they can use the remaining balance to buy a discounted GLP-1 cash pay. And so all of these different benefits that meet people where they are in their life, new mom, focusing on getting healthy nutrition, trying to get better sleep, going through a divorce, all of these things are so hard to design at a macro level, but when you go down into the individual, allowing people to have choice is so important. Now granted, I'm sure many people in this room have fielded some kind of question about what's the status of my plan, or what's going on with this claim and so forth. And so it gets harder as an HR leader to go from one plan to 100 plans. And part of what we do within our product is to actually manage the aspects of the enrollment for the employees and for you. And so in real time, anyone can get access to, hey, what's the status of my enrollments? What's going on with medical, dental, vision? How much budget do I have left to actually spend on these different services that we have available through my employer? And all of these things end up making it so that the experience that the employees have is much more intuitive and seamless, and there are far fewer questions that you get. We're incredibly bullish on the ability to scale through artificial intelligence. And one of the really powerful things that we have built into the product is an AI agent that can actually help. There would be no presentation complete without AI, by the way. So I've got to fit it in here. But one of the really cool things that we have is a service that allows individuals to get real-time support for questions that they might have. And so a great example is I'm standing in a Walgreens and I don't know if a humidifier is an eligible healthcare expense. You can text that right on the spot and get an answer right away. Or you're standing at the doctor and you're swiping your credit card to pay for the copay. Right at that moment, we'll send a text message to you. You can snap a photo and hit reply, and we'll use AI to grab the transaction, match it to the expense, and administer the program. So there's no receipt tracking for you, no verifying or managing expenses. We handle that all fully kind of built into our platform. And It's absolutely something that you probably shouldn't like DIY at home because the compliance around how you manage the allowances and calculate the affordability and so forth, all of these are kind of key components to the value proposition that we create for you as the employer and your employees. And I'll kind of wrap up, and I wanted to actually leave a little bit of time for questions so that we can, this is like such a new topic and people always have a lot of questions, but I'll wrap up with an example from one of our customers who said, transitioning to Thatch gave us exactly what we needed: predictability, flexibility, and a better employee experience. You don't want to switch to a new model that might save you a lot of money if your employees are going to be upset, right? Because you could just reduce the contribution on your existing plan. You want to move to a model that controls your costs, provides flexibility for your employees, and actually allows them to be happier, better off. And that is the needle that we try to thread here at Thatch, so that not only are you able to manage your healthcare costs as a business, but also so that your employees can feel like they have the best benefits that they've ever had at any company they've ever worked for. So that's the kind of bar and the standard we set. Thank you so much for listening to my talk, and I'm excited to answer some of your questions.
Chris was not lying that there's usually a lot of questions. The Q&A on the app is blowing up. The first question is, how do self-funded plans fit this model?
Yeah, great question. So most large employers are self-funded, and they're self-funded because of the principle that if you are large enough and you can distribute your cost structure over a large employee base, that's typically a superior model to what you can get from going directly to an insurance company who's going to add a markup directly and basically be fully insured. Now, there are a couple things about the self-funded model that are changing soon, and some of them are probably on your radar. For example, the pharmacy rebate program is going away, and that usually contributes about 10 to 15% cost savings to the cost of the program. So self-funded plans are like a little bit under the microscope right now from a regulatory perspective, so that's something to be aware of. When a self-funded customer switches over to Thatch, we just signed up yesterday. I just had a conversation with a 2,000 person company, 1,200 employees are enrolled. They're moving from a self-funded plan to Thatch. And the reason for that is when you actually move to this model, you're no longer underwritten, you're no longer on the hook for your own healthcare costs. The real question that you're asking is like, is the average claim of my employee, or the average cost that I have as an employer, how does that compare to the average cost structure of the individual market? Because the individual market has now grown to 25 million people. It's larger than all of the employees at all of the companies in this room, probably by a factor of 10. And as a result, it's a very strong and stable risk pool. So when you move to this model, you're no longer self-funded. Your employees are on fully insured plans, and you're capping your liability by setting an allowance that ends up being the max that you'll pay.
In the same vein, are there specific types of companies that this plan works better for?
Absolutely. So when we got started 4 years ago, our first customers were like small businesses and startups, and people kind of looked like us. And then over the last 4 years, we've now grown to thousands of companies, tens of thousands of members. And the largest growing segment is actually the middle market from 500 to 5,000 employees, and then on the tails on either side. The reason for that really has to do with the fact that like group costs to sponsor a group plan, those costs are going up really, really fast. And the individual market, those costs have been relatively more stable over a 5-year period than the actual employer environment. And as that risk pool has grown, more and more companies are differentially able to benefit from moving on to the individual market. Now, there are certain industries that we see more commonly. Healthcare is an industry that's like very, very well represented. We have about 20% of our customers are technology companies, but we have everything from nonprofits to financial services to construction and retail and everything in between. So that's kind of the general range of who might be a good fit.
The next question is 2 parts. For a company that is currently fully insured, what are the key factors we should consider to determine whether transitioning to an ICHRA model would be beneficial for all employees? And then also, how long in advance must a company plan for this type of change?
That's an excellent question, and it really depends on, in that category, your size. So if you're a 5-person fully insured company on a small group plan, really a lot of the equation is like, how does the small group market look like compared to the individual market? And am I happy with the option that I have available to me? In many, many states, the individual and small group plans look identical. In some cases, there's some nuance. But in general, for a smaller company, it's about, is the cost similar? And then do I want to handle the administration and every year the renewal and so forth? Once you get into a little bit of a larger company, it's really kind of back to that equation of like, what does the risk profile look like of your group? And are they happy with all the plans that are available to them? Because a lot of the benefits of moving to an ICRA are saving money or controlling your costs long term, providing more flexibility and choice for your employees, and then simplifying the administration where you no longer have to go through the annual renewal process with the single carrier. In terms of the timing, we onboarded this 2,000-person company in 2 weeks. For a small business, we have 85% of the businesses that come through our platform under 10 employees do so self-service, and they can get signed up the same day. So we make this really, really easy and simple, whether you're a 1-person company or a 2,000-person company.
So you mentioned multiple industries. Has there been any success in moving to this model in unionized environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the union model, how do we set the allowances for different employees? We set it based on a series of classes that the government allows us to do. And one of those actually happens to be kind of in the union versus non-union, but the other classes are like age, zip code, and some of the things that I was mentioning earlier. In terms of the union piece, like there are a few kind of like complications as it relates to like often the union has different kind of bargaining power directly with the insurance company. So we don't have any like large unions that have like moved to the platform, but it is an area that like folks have talked to us about, particularly as like how the non-union and union intersect with each other. So if anyone's curious to learn more about that, like it's probably like more than a 2-minute answer, but we're happy to chat about that later.
Okay, so we're in the HR world. Can you share any data that you have tracked on the impact of attracting talent into an organization that has moved to this type of benefit option?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So what we have not done is like post-implementation tracked like the offer acceptance rate for companies, for example, so like the talent attraction side. But we have done studies on the actual kind of before and after of how existing employees rate their benefits relative to what they had before and relative to what they've had at prior companies. And so just to give a couple examples, like middle market company with employees all over the country, they were able to save 34% on their total employer healthcare costs, while the employee satisfaction relative to what they had in the prior year increased by a factor of 18%. And when we look at people who are, believe that the benefits that, that they have today with Thatch are as good or better than what they had before, we regularly score kind of in the 75 to 80% plus range. And so it is a change for companies, but it's one where, our commitment is we want to make sure that people have a great experience. And so a lot of the work that we do up front is ensuring that the allowances are equitable so people have the purchasing power to be able to get plans that work well for them.
I'm going to finish with one more question. If the marketplace is expected to keep increasing, how do we continue to protect employees through an ICRA? And would we see the same increase year over year to provide like coverage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the benefit of moving into the marketplace is you're part of a risk pool with 25 million people. And so that is a very large and stable risk pool, and it's almost certainly going to give you a renewal that is more like the average renewal. Whereas employers are unfortunately in a position where some people are getting a 2% renewal and some are getting a 200%, maybe not that much, but like we've seen some pretty crazy stuff. And so the benefits of this model are actually just having a more predictable cost increase that's more modest versus something where you can have 1 year that's absolutely insane and you have to kind of work it out and figure it out. So I know that was the last question. Thank you so much for listening to my talk today. Really wonderful to be here, and hope everyone has a safe and non-disruptive travel back home. Thank you.